On a bone-chilling Tuesday morning in late November 2024, Harrison Vale stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Lake Shore Drive mansion, his reflection ghost-like against the gray waters of Lake Michigan. At 38, he possessed the kind of sharp, angular features that graced magazine covers: steel gray eyes, perfectly styled dark hair with distinguished silver at the temples, and a jawline that photographers loved. Today, however, those same features were etched with exhaustion. His usually impeccable navy suit hung slightly loose on his tall frame, evidence of the sleepless nights that had become his reality. The numbers on his phone screen blurred together. Another specialist, another consultation fee, another dead end. Dr. Patricia Hendricks from Johns Hopkins. Dr. Michael Chen from Boston Children's. Dr. Rebecca Torres from UCLA Medical Center. The best pediatric specialists money could summon, all delivering the same devastating verdict about his 8-year-old daughter. "Mr. Vale," his assistant Jennifer's voice crackled through the intercom. "Dr. Hendricks is on line 3. Harrison's stomach clenched. He'd been dreading this call since yesterday's comprehensive evaluation. "Put her through." "Harrison, I've reviewed all of Evelyn's latest tests." Dr. Hendricks' voice carried the practiced gentleness of someone who delivered life-altering news daily. "Her nutritional levels are critical. If she doesn't start eating solid food within the next 48 hours, we'll have no choice but to hospitalize her for poor nutrition. Her body is consuming muscle tissue now." The phone nearly slipped from Harrison's grasp. Through the windows, Chicago's skyline blurred as tears he refused to shed burned his eyes. There has to be something else. Some medication, some procedure. "Harrison, you're not listening. This isn't medical anymore. Evelyn's refusal to eat is psychological. The divorce, the custody battle, the constant upheaval. Children her age internalize trauma through control mechanisms. Food refusal is her way of having power in a situation where she feels powerless. Control. The word hit him like a physical blow. His daughter was starving herself because his world, his carefully constructed empire of mergers and acquisitions, had fallen apart around her. "What do I do?" The question escaped as barely a whisper. "Find what she's lost. Safety. Comfort. The feeling that someone truly sees her." Dr. Hendricks paused. "And Harrison, it can't be forced. It has to feel real." 23 miles south, in a cramped 2-bedroom house on Chicago's South Side, Celeste Turner was fighting her own battle with time and money. At 29, she moved through her grandmother's kitchen with the fluid grace of someone who'd been cooking since she could reach the counter. Her rich brown skin glowed with perspiration from the morning's prep work, and her thick, natural hair was pulled back in a colorful head wrap that had belonged to her mother. Celeste's hands, strong and elegant with short, practical nails, worked methodically through her third catering order of the day. 40 lunchboxes for the construction crew on Roosevelt Road, each containing her grandmother's famous jerk chicken recipe. The bright yellow apron she wore over her simple black t-shirt and jeans was splattered with spices that told the story of her morning. Turmeric from the curry chicken, paprika from the roasted sweet potatoes, and cocoa powder from the brownies cooling on every available surface. "Baby girl, you're gonna work yourself into the ground," her grandmother Nora called from her chair by the window. At 78, Nora Turner had the kind of lined face that spoke of hard-earned wisdom and hands that still moved with surprising strength when she insisted on helping with the dinner prep. "We need this month's rent, Grandma. Mrs. Patterson's catering company is booked solid through New Year's, and she's throwing me enough overflow work to catch up on everything." Celeste wiped her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a small flour smudge near her temple. "Plus, if I can prove I can handle the volume, she might offer me that permanent position." The truth was more complicated than she let on. The permanent position paid well enough to move Grandma Nora out of this neighborhood where gunshots punctuated too many evenings. Well enough to stop working 3 different catering gigs and focus on the restaurant she dreamed of opening. Well enough to stop calculating every grocery store purchase down to the quarter. Her phone buzzed against the counter, a text from Mrs. Patterson. Emergency call. Northside client needs immediate catering for sick child. Big tip potential. You available? Celeste's heart raced. Emergency calls from wealthy clients usually meant double or triple pay, but they also meant dropping everything and hoping her beat-up Honda Civic would make it to whatever fancy neighborhood required her services. Address. She texted back. 1247 Lake Shore Drive. Client name. Harrison Vale. Dietary restrictions. Child with eating issues. Comfort food requested. Can you be there by 2 p.m.? Celeste glanced at the clock. 11:47 a.m. Lake Shore Drive meant serious money, the kind of lakefront mansions she'd only seen in magazines. The kind of client who could change her financial situation with a single recommendation. Grandma, I need to take an emergency call. Big client on the north side. Nora's weathered hands paused in their sorting of dried beans. Those rich folks on the lake. Baby, you be careful up there. Sometimes they want more than just cooking. It's about a sick child, Grandma. Someone's little girl who won't eat. Celeste's voice softened. Food had always been her love language, the way she showed care when words felt inadequate. Maybe I can help. She gathered her supplies with practiced efficiency. Her grandmother's cast-iron skillet that seasoned everything with decades of love, the wooden spoons carved by her grandfather's hands, and her special spice blend that had never failed to make even the pickiest eater smile. Her hands moved automatically through the familiar ritual of packing her mobile kitchen, but her mind wandered to the child she'd never met. What makes a little girl stop eating? She wondered, wrapping her sharpest knife in its protective cloth. What kind of hunger can't be filled with food? By 1:30 p.m., Celeste was navigating her Honda through the winding drives of Chicago's most exclusive neighborhood. The contrast between her morning location and her afternoon destination felt surreal. From houses where families gathered on front porches despite the cold, to estates hidden behind gates and designer landscaping. When she pulled up to 1247 Lake Shore Drive, her breath caught. The Vale mansion stretched 3 stories high, its limestone facade and copper accents speaking of old money and careful taste. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed glimpses of soaring ceilings and abstract art that probably cost more than she'd earn in 5 years. What am I doing here? The familiar voice of self-doubt whispered in her mind. This isn't your world, Celeste. But then she thought about the little girl inside who wouldn't eat, and her hands tightened on the steering wheel. Hunger was hunger, whether it lived in a mansion or a cramped apartment. And if there was one thing Celeste Turner knew how to do, it was feed people who needed feeding. She grabbed her supplies from the back seat, straightened her shoulders, and walked toward the front door of a world she'd never imagined entering. The Vale Mansion's front door opened before Celeste could even ring the bell. A tall, impeccably dressed man with haunted gray eyes stood in the doorway, and she immediately recognized the desperate energy of a parent at the end of his rope. Ms. Turner? Thank God you're here. Harrison's voice carried the ragged edge of sleepless nights. Up close, she could see the designer stubble couldn't hide the hollows beneath his cheekbones, and his expensive white dress shirt was wrinkled as if he'd slept in it. I'm Harrison Vale. Please, come in. Celeste stepped into a foyer that belonged in an art museum. Polished marble floors reflected crystal chandeliers, and oil paintings in ornate frames lined walls that soared 20 feet high. But she barely noticed the opulence. Her attention was caught by the silence. Not the peaceful quiet of a well-appointed home, but the hollow stillness of a house where joy had packed its bags and left. Tell me about your daughter, she said, adjusting the strap of her supply bag. Mrs. Patterson mentioned eating issues, but I need to understand what we're dealing with. Harrison ran a hand through his hair, messing the perfectly styled strands. Evelyn. She's 8 years old, and she hasn't eaten a full meal in 3 weeks. Just water, and occasionally she'll take a sip of juice if I'm not watching too closely. The doctors say. His voice cracked slightly. They say if she doesn't start eating soon, they'll have to hospitalize her. As if summoned by her name, a small voice drifted down from the curved staircase. Daddy, is someone here? Celeste looked up and felt her heart squeeze. At the top of the stairs stood the tiniest girl she'd ever seen, all sharp angles and enormous blue eyes in a face that should have been round with childhood. Evelyn Vale wore a bright purple pajama set covered in dancing unicorns, but the fabric hung loose on her shrinking frame. Her blonde hair, the same color as her father's, was pulled into two uneven braids that suggested she'd done them herself. "Hi there, sweetheart," Celeste called up, her voice automatically shifting to the warm, gentle tone she'd used with every scared child she'd ever encountered. "I'm Celeste. I heard you might be hungry." Evelyn's eyes narrowed with the suspicious wisdom of a child who'd learned that adults often lied. "I'm not hungry. I told Daddy I'm not hungry." "That's okay," Celeste said, pulling her grandmother's cast-iron skillet from her bag with deliberate ceremony. "I brought my magic pan anyway. Sometimes it makes food even when people aren't hungry. Would you like to see?" For the first time in weeks, curiosity flickered across Evelyn's face. She descended 3 steps, then stopped, gripping the banister with small hands that looked almost translucent. Harrison watched this interaction with barely contained emotion. He'd hired nutritionists, child psychologists, even a specialist in eating disorders. All of them had failed to get this kind of response from his daughter. "The kitchen is this way," he said quietly. The Vale kitchen was a chef's dream: white marble countertops, professional-grade appliances, and enough space to feed an army. But like the rest of the house, it felt cold, unused. The refrigerator was stocked with expensive organic foods that had clearly gone untouched. Celeste set down her supplies and began unpacking with practiced ease. "Evelyn, honey, can you sit right here where I can see you?" She patted the counter stool closest to the stove. "I need a supervisor for this magic trick." Evelyn approached cautiously, her bare feet silent on the heated marble floors. She climbed onto the stool but kept her distance, as if preparing to flee. "Now," Celeste said, firing up the burner under her grandmother's skillet, "this pan belonged to my great-grandmother, then my grandmother, then my mama, and now me. 4 generations of women have cooked love in this pan. You know what that means." "What?" Evelyn whispered, the first word she'd spoken directly to Celeste. "It means this pan knows how to make food that tastes like a hug." Celeste opened her bag of spices, letting the aromas of cinnamon, nutmeg, and vanilla drift through the kitchen. "But it only works if you help me. Think you can do that?" Evelyn nodded, and Celeste saw Harrison lean against the doorframe, his eyes fixed on his daughter with desperate hope. "First, we need to know what kind of hug you need today. A warm, cozy hug? A giggly, tickly hug? Or maybe a strong, safe hug?" Evelyn considered this with the seriousness of a judge deliberating a verdict. "A safe hug," she said finally. "Perfect choice." Celeste pulled ingredients from her bag: thick-cut bread, real butter, aged cheddar cheese, and a jar of homemade tomato soup that caught the light like liquid sunshine. Safe hugs taste like grilled cheese and tomato soup on rainy days. They taste like someone who promises to stay. As Celeste worked, she kept up a gentle stream of conversation. She told Evelyn about her grandmother's house where the kitchen was always warm and the cookie jar was never empty. She described Sunday dinners where the whole neighborhood would show up, and somehow there was always enough food for everyone. "My mama used to say," Celeste said, buttering the bread with careful strokes, "that food is just ingredients until you add love. Then it becomes magic." The butter hit the hot pan with a satisfying sizzle, and the smell of toasting bread began to fill the kitchen. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, her nose twitching at the familiar aroma. "Can I ask you something, sweetheart?" Celeste said, flipping the sandwich with expert precision. "When's the last time someone cooked just for you? Not because they had to, but because they wanted to make you happy." Evelyn's face crumpled slightly. "Mama used to make me pancakes with smiley faces. But she doesn't live here anymore." Harrison's sharp intake of breath was audible from the doorway. His ex-wife Rachel had left 6 months ago, taking not just herself but every warm tradition that had made their house feel like a home. "Well," Celeste said, ladling the golden soup into a bowl painted with cheerful sunflowers, Today you get grilled cheese made by someone who thinks you're pretty special. Even if we just met. She cut the sandwich diagonally, because everyone knew triangles tasted better than rectangles, and placed it on a bright blue plate beside the steaming soup. The cheese stretched in perfect strings, and steam rose from the bowl like incense in a cathedral. "There," Celeste said, sliding the plate across the counter. "One safe hug, made with magic pan power." Evelyn stared at the food, and for a moment, Celeste worried she'd pushed too hard, too fast. But then the little girl reached out with one finger and touched the edge of the sandwich, as if testing whether it was real. "It smells like..." Evelyn paused, searching for words. "Like someone loves me." Celeste felt tears prick her eyes. "That's because someone does, honey. Your daddy loves you so much it makes my heart hurt just watching him look at you." Evelyn glanced toward the doorway where Harrison stood frozen, afraid that any movement might break the spell. Then, with the careful deliberation of someone making a monumental decision, she picked up the sandwich and took a small bite. The change in Harrison's face was immediate and profound. Relief, gratitude, and something deeper, something that looked like recognition, washed over his features as he watched his daughter chew and swallow. Then Evelyn smiled, the first real smile anyone had seen from her in weeks, and took another bite. "Good?" Celeste asked. "Magic," Evelyn confirmed, reaching for her soup spoon. Harrison stepped into the kitchen, his legs suddenly unsteady. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Celeste met his eyes, and something electric passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. Two people who understood that sometimes the most important moments happened in kitchens, around tables, over shared meals. "Just let her eat," Celeste said softly. "That's thanks enough." But they both knew it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough for what had just happened in this kitchen. 3 hours later, Evelyn had finished the entire sandwich and half the soup. More food than she'd consumed in the past 10 days combined. She now sat curled in Celeste's lap on the living room sofa, her small head resting against Celeste's shoulder as they read from a well-worn copy of Charlotte's Web. Harrison paced the length of his study, phone pressed to his ear, his earlier relief now transformed into something approaching panic. The warmth he'd felt watching his daughter eat had been replaced by a cold calculation that he recognized all too well, the same analytical detachment that had built his empire but destroyed his marriage. "Jennifer, I need a full background check on Celeste Turner. Everything: financial history, employment records, family connections, criminal background. I want it by morning." He paused at his desk, fingers drumming against the mahogany surface. "And contact our legal team. I want to know what kind of contract we'd need for a live-in caregiver situation." "Sir." Jennifer's voice carried confusion. "I thought this was just emergency catering." "Plans change. This woman got Evelyn to eat. I need to understand exactly who she is and what it's going to cost to keep her here permanently." But even as he spoke the words, they felt wrong in his mouth. He'd built his fortune by identifying value and acquiring it, yet something about applying that same logic to Celeste made his stomach turn. The way she'd spoken to Evelyn, the gentle patience in her voice, it couldn't be bought. Could it? "Everything has a price," he reminded himself. "I just need to find hers." Downstairs, Celeste was fighting her own internal war. Evelyn had fallen asleep against her chest, and the weight of the child's trust felt both precious and terrifying. This wasn't her world. The Persian rug beneath her feet probably cost more than her car, and the oil painting above the fireplace looked like something that belonged in the Art Institute of Chicago. Her phone buzzed with a text from Grandma Nora. "How's it going, baby girl? You been gone a long time." Celeste glanced at the ornate clock on the mantelpiece. 6:47 p.m. She'd been here for nearly 5 hours, far longer than any catering job should take. But every time she tried to leave, Evelyn had asked her to stay, just a little longer. "Complicated," she texted back. Little girl needed more than just food. "Rich folks always need more than they can afford," came Nora's immediate reply. You remember that. The words stung because they carried the weight of experience. Celeste had watched her mother clean houses for wealthy families who treated her like invisible furniture. She'd seen how easily kindness could be mistaken for servitude, how quickly gratitude could transform into expectation. Celeste! Evelyn's sleepy voice interrupted her thoughts. Are you leaving now? The question hit like a physical blow. How could she explain to an 8-year-old that she didn't belong in this marble palace? That her beat-up Honda looked ridiculous parked next to the Tesla and Mercedes in the circular drive? I need to get home to my grandmother, sweetheart. She's waiting for me. Evelyn's grip tightened on Celeste's shirt. But what if I get hungry again? What if the magic doesn't work without you? Before Celeste could answer, Harrison appeared in the doorway. He'd changed from his wrinkled dress shirt into dark jeans and a gray sweater that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. The casual clothes should have made him seem more approachable, but instead they highlighted the fundamental difference between their worlds. Even his relaxation came with a designer price tag. I'd like to discuss an arrangement, he said, his voice carrying the crisp authority of a boardroom negotiation. I'm prepared to offer you a position as Evelyn's nutritional specialist. Full-time, live-in, with a salary that would be substantial. Celeste felt her spine stiffen. A position? You've accomplished in one afternoon what teams of specialists couldn't manage in weeks. Evelyn trusts you. She's eating. I'm willing to compensate you handsomely for continuing that progress. The words hung in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle. Compensate. Progress. Arrangement. Business terms that reduced the magic of the afternoon to a transaction. I'm not for sale, Mr. Vale. Celeste's voice was quiet but firm. She carefully shifted Evelyn off her lap and stood, smoothing her simple black pants that suddenly felt shabby in the opulent room. What happened today happened because your daughter needed someone to see her as more than a problem to be solved. Harrison's jaw tightened. I didn't mean to imply. Yes, you did. Celeste gathered her supplies with jerky movements, her earlier grace replaced by wounded pride. You want to put me on your payroll like your housekeeper or your driver. Someone you can control, someone who works for you instead of caring about her. That's not. Harrison stopped, because he realized with uncomfortable clarity that it was exactly what he'd meant. The same instinct that had built his fortune, identify, acquire, control, had kicked in the moment he'd seen Evelyn respond to Celeste's care. Evelyn, now fully awake, looked between the two adults with the sharp intuition of a child who'd learned to read emotional weather patterns. Are you fighting because of me? No, baby, Celeste said, kneeling to Evelyn's eye level. Sometimes grown-ups just see things differently. Daddy makes people go away when they see things differently, Evelyn said with devastating matter-of-factness. That's why Mama left. The words hit Harrison like a physical blow. His daughter's casual acceptance of his pattern, his need to control every variable, laid bare the very flaw that had cost him his marriage. Celeste saw the pain flicker across his face and felt her anger soften slightly. This wasn't about money or control. This was about a man so terrified of losing his daughter that he was trying to cage the very thing that might save her. Mr. Vale, she said gently, you can't hire someone to love your daughter. It doesn't work that way. Then what does work? The question escaped him raw and desperate. Tell me what works, because I'm drowning here. I have more money than I can spend in 3 lifetimes. And I can't get my 8-year-old daughter to eat a sandwich. The vulnerability in his voice cracked something open in Celeste's chest. She saw past the designer clothes and the commanding presence to the frightened father underneath. Trust works, she said quietly. Patience works. Showing up without expecting anything in return works. Harrison stared at her, and for a moment the air between them crackled with something neither was ready to name. Then his phone rang, a sharp, businesslike sound that shattered the moment. I have to take this, he said, glancing at the screen. International call I've been waiting for. As he stepped into the hallway, Celeste heard his voice transform back into its boardroom cadence. Harrison Vale speaking. Yes, I've reviewed the Singapore projections. The businessman was back, and the vulnerable father had disappeared behind familiar armor. Evelyn tugged on Celeste's sleeve. He does that when he's scared. Mama used to say Daddy hides behind his work when his feelings get too big. Out of the mouths of babes. Celeste looked down at this wise little girl who'd learned to read adults like weather patterns, and her heart broke a little more. I really do need to go home, sweetheart. But I'll tell you a secret. The magic isn't in me. It's in the caring. And your daddy cares about you more than anything in the whole world. Will you come back? Evelyn's blue eyes were wide with hope and fear. Celeste hesitated. Every instinct told her to run from this golden cage before she got trapped in it. But looking at Evelyn's face, she couldn't bring herself to close that door completely. Maybe, she said finally, if you promise to keep eating, even when I'm not here. I promise, Evelyn said solemnly. As Celeste gathered the last of her things, she could still hear Harrison's voice from the hallway. Confident, controlled, completely different from the broken man who'd asked her what works. She left her phone number on the kitchen counter, not sure if she hoped he'd call or prayed he wouldn't. What do you think? Should Celeste have stayed, or was she right to leave? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that like button if you're invested in this story. At 2:17 a.m., Harrison's phone shattered the silence of his bedroom with a ringtone that sent ice through his veins, the emergency contact for Evelyn's medical team. He answered before the second ring, already reaching for the clothes he'd left draped over his chair. Mr. Vale. This is Dr. Patricia Hendricks. I'm at Northwestern Memorial with Evelyn. She's stable, but you need to get here immediately. The world tilted sideways. What happened? She was fine when I put her to bed. She ate dinner. Severe dehydration and what appears to be a panic attack. Your housekeeper found her collapsed in her bathroom around midnight. She's been asking for someone named Celeste. Do you know who that is? Harrison was already moving, grabbing his keys and wallet. The woman who got her to eat today. I'll call her. Mr. Vale, it's past 2 in the morning. I don't care what time it is. The drive to Northwestern Memorial passed in a blur of empty streets and red traffic lights that felt like personal affronts. Harrison's hands shook as he dialed Celeste's number, praying she wouldn't ignore an unknown caller at this ungodly hour. Hello. Her voice was thick with sleep but instantly alert, the response of someone who'd grown up expecting middle-of-the-night emergencies. Celeste, it's Harrison Vale. Evelyn is in the hospital. She's asking for you. The silence stretched so long he thought the call had dropped. Then, what hospital? Northwestern Memorial. Pediatric emergency. I know it's late, I know you don't owe us anything, but she won't stop asking for you. I'm on my way. The line went dead, and Harrison realized he was crying, something he hadn't done since his father's funeral 15 years ago. Celeste arrived at the hospital 45 minutes later, having thrown on the first clothes she could find. Faded jeans, a purple hoodie that had belonged to her mother, and sneakers with a small hole near the left toe. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun secured with a rubber band, and she wore no makeup. She looked nothing like the polished women who usually populated Harrison's world, and she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Room 314, he said, rising from the uncomfortable plastic chair where he'd been maintaining his vigil. She's sedated, but the doctor said she might respond to familiar voices. They rode the elevator in silence, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows that made both of them look older than their years. Harrison noticed that Celeste's hands were trembling slightly, and he had the unexpected urge to reach out and steady them. This isn't your fault, he said quietly. Isn't it? Celeste's voice was raw. I should have stayed. I knew she was fragile, and I left anyway because my pride got hurt. You left because I treated you like an employee instead of... He paused, struggling with words that felt foreign in his mouth. Instead of someone who genuinely cared about my daughter. The elevator dinged softly, and the doors opened to reveal the pediatric ward, a place trying desperately to be cheerful with its rainbow murals and cartoon animal decorations, but unable to hide the underlying current of childhood suffering. Evelyn looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, dwarfed by machines that beeped and hummed with electronic vigilance. And 4 lines snaked from her tiny hand, and her face was pale against the white pillows. But her eyes were open, and they locked onto Celeste the moment she entered the room. "You came," Evelyn whispered, her voice barely audible. "Of course I came, baby girl." Celeste crossed to the bed, her earlier exhaustion evaporating in the face of this child's need. "I'll always come when you need me." The words hung in the air with the weight of a promise neither Harrison nor Celeste had expected her to make. Dr. Hendricks, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, pulled Harrison aside. "The physical symptoms are manageable: dehydration, elevated heart rate, nothing we can't handle. But the psychological component concerns me. She's experienced what we call an attachment disruption. When you form a bond with someone who then disappears, especially after trauma like her parents' divorce, it can trigger severe anxiety responses." Harrison watched Celeste settle into the chair beside Evelyn's bed, automatically adjusting the child's blankets and smoothing her hair with gentle fingers. "What does that mean for her recovery?" "It means consistency is crucial. Whoever this young woman is, Evelyn has imprinted on her as a safe person. Removing that safety net right now could cause a significant setback." The irony wasn't lost on Harrison. His attempt to control the situation by hiring Celeste had driven her away, and her departure had nearly cost Evelyn her fragile progress. "How long?" he asked. "Hard to say. Days, weeks, maybe longer. These things can't be rushed." Harrison looked at Celeste, who was now quietly singing what sounded like a lullaby in a language he didn't recognize. Evelyn's breathing had already become deeper, more relaxed. "I need to make some calls," he said. For the next hour, Harrison utilized every resource at his disposal. He arranged for a private room with a sleeper sofa. He had his assistant coordinate with the hospital's dietary department to ensure Celeste would have access to fresh ingredients and a kitchen space. He cleared his schedule for the next week and activated the emergency protocols that would keep his business running without his constant oversight. When he returned to Evelyn's room, he found Celeste reading from a worn paperback book she'd apparently produced from her purse, something about a girl and a secret garden. Evelyn was hanging on every word, color slowly returning to her cheeks. "The doctor says you need to stay," Harrison said quietly. "For Evelyn's psychological stability." Celeste looked up, wariness flickering across her features. "And if I say no?" "Then I respect that decision. But I'm hoping you won't. This isn't another job offer, is it?" Harrison sat heavily in the second chair the nurses had brought in. "No. This is me asking for help. Not as an employer, but as a father who's in over his head." Something shifted in Celeste's expression. "What about my grandmother? My other jobs? I'll arrange care for your grandmother, the best available. And I'll compensate your other clients for any lost income." Harrison held up a hand when she started to protest. "Not payment to you. Payment to them, so you don't have to worry about burning bridges." "Why?" The question was simple, but Harrison sensed it carried deeper layers. "Because 3 hours ago, I almost lost the only thing in my life that really matters. And the only person who seems able to reach her is sitting in this room." Evelyn stirred in her bed, her small hand reaching out instinctively. Celeste immediately took it, and the child's face relaxed back into peaceful sleep. "1 week," Celeste said finally. "Until she's stable and eating regularly. Then we figure out something more permanent that doesn't involve me living in your world." "Deal." Dr. Hendricks discharged Evelyn the following afternoon with strict instructions about diet, rest, and emotional stability. The drive back to Lakeshore Drive was quiet, with Evelyn dozing in her car seat and Celeste staring out the window at the Chicago skyline. "I've never lived anywhere with more than 2 bedrooms, Celeste said suddenly. "The guest suite has its own sitting area and kitchenette," Harrison replied. You'll have complete privacy. That's not what I meant. She turned to look at him, and he saw the uncertainty she was trying to hide. I don't know how to be around this kind of wealth without feeling like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not. Harrison considered this as they pulled into his circular driveway. Then don't pretend. Be exactly who you are. It's who you are that my daughter needs. That evening, they established a routine that felt both foreign and surprisingly natural. Celeste cooked dinner in the massive kitchen while Evelyn sat at the counter, actually eating small bites and chattering about her favorite books. Harrison found himself lingering in the doorway, drawn by the warmth and laughter that had been absent from his house for months. After dinner, they moved to the living room where Celeste continued reading The Secret Garden while Evelyn curled up between them on the sofa. Harrison found himself listening as much to the reader as to the story, drawn by the musical quality of Celeste's voice and the way she brought each character to life. When Evelyn finally fell asleep, they faced the awkward reality of their temporary living situation. Two virtual strangers, bound together by a child's need and their own complicated feelings about what that meant. "Thank you," Harrison said quietly as Celeste gathered Evelyn into her arms to carry her upstairs. "For staying. For caring about her." "Don't thank me yet," Celeste replied. "We still have 6 days to figure out if this can actually work." But as she disappeared up the staircase with his daughter, Harrison realized he was already hoping for much more than just 6 days. Day 3 at the Vale Mansion brought the first real test of their fragile arrangement. Harrison had been called away for an emergency board meeting, a hostile takeover attempt that required his immediate attention, leaving Celeste alone with Evelyn for the first time since the hospital. "Where did Daddy go?" Evelyn asked, picking at the heart-shaped pancake Celeste had made for breakfast. The kitchen felt different without Harrison's presence, less tense but somehow incomplete. "He had important work things to handle, sweetheart. But he'll be back by dinner." Celeste flipped another pancake, this one shaped like a butterfly. "Want to help me make lunch for when he gets home?" Evelyn nodded, but Celeste could see the familiar anxiety creeping into the child's blue eyes, the same look she'd worn in the hospital when she thought everyone was going to leave her. "Can I tell you a secret?" Celeste said, lifting Evelyn onto the counter so she could reach the mixing bowls. "When I was your age, my daddy went away too, but not for work meetings." Evelyn's attention sharpened. "Where did he go?" Celeste's hands stilled over the flour canister. She'd never told this story to a child before, had barely told it to anyone at all. But something about Evelyn's earnest face and desperate need to understand made the words come easier. "He went to heaven when I was 7. A car accident on his way home from work." Celeste measured flour with careful precision, using the familiar motions to steady herself. "For a long time, I was so angry at him for leaving, even though I knew it wasn't his fault." "Were you scared?" "Terrified. My mama cried for months, and I didn't understand why all the grown-ups kept whispering and looking at me with sad faces." Celeste cracked eggs into the bowl, letting Evelyn help measure the milk. "But you know what I learned." "What?" "Sometimes people leave not because they want to, but because they have to. And sometimes people stay not because they have to, but because they want to." She touched Evelyn's nose with a flour-dusted finger, making the little girl giggle. "Your daddy. He wants to stay. Even when work tries to pull him away, he always comes back to you." Evelyn considered this while stirring the batter with intense concentration. "What happened to your mama?" The question hit harder than Celeste had expected. "She got sick when I was 15. Cancer. She fought it for 2 years, but—" Celeste's voice caught. "She went to heaven too. That's when I moved in with Grandma Nora. Is that why you know how to make sad people feel better with food?" Out of the mouths of babes. Celeste stared at this wise little girl who just identified the driving force behind her entire adult life with 8-year-old clarity. "Yeah, baby. I think it is." They spent the morning baking bread and making soup, their conversation drifting from favorite colors to silly jokes to the kinds of deep thoughts that children possessed but adults often forgot how to access. Celeste found herself sharing stories she'd kept locked away for years. Not the sanitized versions she usually told, but the real messy truth of growing up poor and parentless in a world that often overlooked girls like her. Around noon, while their bread was rising and soup was simmering, Evelyn led Celeste upstairs to her bedroom, a princess fantasy in pink and gold that looked like something from a magazine spread. But what caught Celeste's attention wasn't the canopy bed or the collection of expensive dolls. It was the photographs. Every surface held pictures of Evelyn with a beautiful blonde woman who shared her eyes and smile. Mother and daughter at Disney World, baking Christmas cookies, reading bedtime stories. The images painted a picture of genuine joy and connection that made the current emptiness even more heartbreaking. "That's my mama," Evelyn said, picking up a silver-framed photo from her nightstand. "Rachel Marie Vale. She used to make me pancakes shaped like flowers every Sunday morning. She's beautiful. You look just like her." Evelyn's face crumpled slightly. "Daddy says she lives in California now with her new boyfriend. She sends me presents sometimes, but she doesn't call very much anymore." Celeste felt a surge of anger toward this woman who'd abandoned such a precious child, followed immediately by a wave of sympathy. Divorce was complicated, and she didn't know the whole story. But looking at Evelyn's face, she knew enough. "Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt the people they love," Celeste said carefully. "It doesn't mean they don't love you. It just means they're confused about how to show it." "Is that why Daddy works so much?" "Because he's confused." Before Celeste could answer, they heard the front door open and Harrison's voice calling up the stairs. "I'm home. Something smells incredible." Evelyn's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Daddy, come see what we made." They found Harrison in the kitchen, loosening his tie and looking simultaneously exhausted and relieved. His hair was mussed from running his hands through it, and there were new lines around his eyes that spoke of a difficult day. "How did the meeting go?" Celeste asked, automatically moving to ladle soup into bowls. "Crisis averted, for now. Though I'll probably need to fly to New York tomorrow for follow-up meetings." He paused, seeing Evelyn's face fall. "Unless, would it be possible for you both to come with me? I could arrange for a suite at the plaza, show Evelyn Central Park." "Can we, Celeste? Please." Evelyn bounced on her toes, excitement replacing anxiety. Celeste felt the familiar tug of being pulled deeper into their world. "I've never been to New York," she admitted. "Then it's settled. I'll have Jennifer arrange everything." Harrison tasted the soup and his eyes widened. "This is incredible. What's the secret ingredient?" "Love," Evelyn said matter-of-factly. "Celeste puts love in all her food. That's why it tastes like hugs." Harrison's gaze met Celeste's over his daughter's head, and something unspoken passed between them. Not just gratitude anymore, but recognition, understanding. The beginning of something that felt dangerous and inevitable all at once. That evening, after Evelyn had gone to bed, Harrison found Celeste on the living room sofa with a cup of tea and her worn paperback book. She'd changed into soft gray leggings and an oversized sweater the color of autumn leaves, comfort clothes that made her look younger and somehow more vulnerable. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. She gestured to the other end of the sofa, and he settled there with his own cup of coffee, careful to maintain distance while fighting the urge to move closer. "Evelyn told me you shared some of your story with her today," he said quietly. She needed to know she wasn't the only one who'd lost people. Celeste marked her place in the book and set it aside. "I hope that was okay." "More than okay. She hasn't talked about her mother in months. I was starting to worry she was bottling it all up." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the crackling fire and distant city sounds creating a cocoon of intimacy that felt both foreign and perfectly natural. "Can I ask what happened with your marriage?" Celeste said suddenly. "You don't have to answer if it's too personal." Harrison stared into his coffee, weighing how much truth he was ready to share. Rachel said, "I loved my work more than I loved her. More than I loved Evelyn." "Did you?" The question was gentle but direct, and it cut right to the heart of his deepest fear. "I thought I was providing for them. Building something that would give them security, opportunities. I didn't realize I was building a wall between us until it was too late." "What changed your mind?" "Watching you with Evelyn. Seeing what she responds to. It's not the expensive toys or the fancy trips. It's someone who sits on the floor and really listens when she talks. Someone who remembers that she likes her sandwiches cut into triangles and her stories read with different voices for each character." Celeste curled her legs beneath her sweater sliding off one shoulder in a way that made Harrison's breath catch. "She's an amazing little girl. You did something right. We did something right. Rachel and I, before everything fell apart." His voice grew quiet. "I keep wondering if I can learn to be the father Evelyn needs, or if I'm too broken by my own childhood to get it right." "What was your childhood like?" Harrison laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Picture everything warm and loving about your grandmother's house, then imagine the exact opposite. My father believed that affection made children weak. Love was earned through achievement, and it could be withdrawn just as easily." "That's not love," Celeste said fiercely. "That's conditional approval. I know that now. But old patterns run deep. When Evelyn was born, I swore I'd be different. But the moment things got difficult, I reverted to what I knew: work harder, achieve more, fix everything through success. And it almost cost you everything. It did cost me everything. Rachel, my marriage, my relationship with Evelyn. If not for you." He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Celeste reached across the space between them and touched his hand briefly, a gesture of comfort that sent electricity up his arm. "You're learning. That's what matters." They talked until nearly midnight, sharing stories and fears and dreams they'd never spoken aloud. And when they finally said goodnight and retreated to their separate rooms, both carried the knowledge that something fundamental had shifted between them. Something that felt like the beginning of falling in love. The Plaza Hotel suite was everything Celeste had imagined luxury could be. Marble bathrooms, crystal chandeliers, and windows that offered a breathtaking view of Central Park dusted with December snow. But what made it magical wasn't the opulence. It was watching Evelyn's face light up as she pressed her nose to the glass and counted the horse-drawn carriages below. "Look, Celeste. The horses have bells on their harnesses that sparkle in the snow." Evelyn's breath fogged the window as she bounced excitedly. "Can we ride in one? Please." Harrison emerged from the bedroom where he'd been taking calls, his usual business armor replaced by dark jeans and a forest green sweater that made his eyes look less storm gray and more like sea glass. The transformation was startling. He looked younger, more relaxed, like a man who'd remembered how to smile. "Carriage ride is already scheduled for this afternoon," he said, grinning at his daughter's squeal of delight. "But first, we're going ice skating at Rockefeller Center." "I don't know how to ice skate," Celeste admitted, suddenly feeling out of place again. This wasn't just a father-daughter trip. It was the kind of expensive family vacation she'd only seen in movies. "Perfect. That makes two of us," Harrison said with a self-deprecating laugh. "I spent my childhood in boarding schools where physical activities were limited to tennis and sailing. I've never been on ice skates in my life." "Daddy, you're fibbing." Evelyn giggled. "Scout's honor. We'll all be complete disasters together." 3 hours later, they were indeed complete disasters. But they were disasters together, clutching the rink's barrier and laughing until their sides hurt. Harrison had fallen 4 times in the first 10 minutes, his long limbs tangling in ways that defied physics. Celeste proved slightly more graceful but kept overcompensating and gliding backward into innocent bystanders. Only Evelyn, with the fearless confidence of childhood, seemed to have natural ability, though she spent more time helping the adults than skating herself. "Daddy, you have to keep your knees bent," Evelyn called out, demonstrating with 8-year-old expertise. And don't lean forward so much. Easy for you to say, Little Miss Olympic Champion, Harrison replied, windmilling his arms dramatically as he wobbled past. Some of us are working with creaky old bones here. You're not old, Daddy. You're just uncoordinated. Celeste burst into laughter, the sound pure and musical in the crisp December air. Harrison, hearing it, forgot to watch where he was going and promptly crashed into the barrier, taking Celeste down with him in a tangle of limbs and giggles. "Oh my God, are you okay?" Celeste gasped, trying to untangle herself from Harrison's arm that had somehow ended up around her waist. They were sitting on the ice, faces inches apart, and for a moment the noise of the rink faded to nothing. "Better than okay," Harrison said softly, his breath visible in small clouds between them. His eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her stomach flip. "Celeste! Daddy! You're both sitting ducks for the Zamboni." Evelyn's voice broke the spell, and they scrambled to their feet, cheeks burning from more than just the cold. After ice skating came hot chocolate at a cafe that served marshmallows bigger than Evelyn's fist, followed by the promised carriage ride through Central Park. They snuggled under thick wool blankets while their driver, a cheerful man named Patrick with a thick Irish accent, pointed out landmarks and told stories about the park's history. "See that bridge there?" Patrick said, gesturing with his whip toward an ornate stone structure. "Bow Bridge, it's called. Legend says if you kiss someone you love on that bridge, you'll be together forever." Evelyn perked up immediately. "Can we walk on it, please?" As they strolled across Bow Bridge, the late afternoon sun painted the snow-covered park in shades of gold and rose. Evelyn ran ahead, fascinated by the patterns frost had made on the bridge's railings, leaving Harrison and Celeste walking slowly behind her. "This is the most perfect day I've had in years," Celeste said quietly, watching Evelyn attempt to catch snowflakes on her tongue. "Even with my spectacular ice skating performance?" "Especially because of that." She bumped his shoulder playfully with hers. "I've never seen you just be yourself before. Not the CEO, not the concerned father, just Harrison. I'm not sure I remember how to be just Harrison. It's been a long time since anyone wanted to know that version of me." They paused at the center of the bridge, ostensibly to wait for Evelyn, but really because neither wanted the moment to end. The park stretched around them like a winter wonderland, complete with the soft whisper of falling snow and the distant sound of children's laughter. "I want to know," Celeste said, turning to face him fully. "All the versions of you. The workaholic, the worried father, the man who can't ice skate to save his life. All of it." Harrison felt something crack open in his chest. Not breaking, but blooming. "That's dangerous territory, Celeste. I'm not sure I'm worth knowing that well. Let me be the judge of that." Before he could respond, Evelyn came racing back, her cheeks bright red with cold and excitement. "I caught 17 snowflakes. And I made a wish on the bridge like Patrick said." "What did you wish for?" Harrison asked, kneeling to adjust his daughter's scarf. "I can't tell you or it won't come true. But it's the best wish ever." Evelyn's eyes sparkled with secrets and snow. That evening, back at the plaza, they ordered room service and had an impromptu picnic on the floor of the suite's living room. Celeste had somehow convinced the kitchen to let her prepare Evelyn's meal personally, and the sight of her working in the hotel's pristine kitchen had drawn a small crowd of curious chefs wanting to know her secrets. "The trick," she'd explained to the head chef, a stern Frenchman named Philippe, "is to cook with your heart, not just your hands. This little girl has been through a lot. The food needs to taste like hope." Philippe had watched her season a simple chicken soup with what looked like magic. A pinch of this, a whisper of that, all while humming softly under her breath. When he tasted the result, his eyes had widened with surprise and something approaching reverence. "Mademoiselle," he'd said formally, "if you ever decide to leave whatever job you have now, we would be honored to have you in our kitchen." Now, watching Evelyn devour that same soup while sitting cross-legged on a Persian rug that probably cost more than most people's cars, Celeste felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the food. "Tell us about your restaurant dream," Harrison said suddenly. Celeste looked up from her own bowl, surprised. How did you? Evelyn mentioned it yesterday. Something about you wanting to open a place where people could come when they needed to feel loved. It's just a silly dream, Celeste deflected, but Evelyn wasn't having it. It's not silly. Tell Daddy about the community tables and the cookbook project. So Celeste found herself describing her vision, a restaurant that would be part eatery, part community center, where people could come not just for food but for connection. Tables designed for sharing, cooking classes for kids whose parents worked multiple jobs, a cookbook featuring recipes and stories from neighborhood grandmothers whose wisdom was disappearing with each passing generation. I want to call it Nora's Table, she said softly, after my grandmother. She always said her kitchen table was where the magic happened, not just cooking magic, but life magic, where problems got solved and hearts got healed. Harrison listened with the focused attention he usually reserved for billion-dollar deals, asking thoughtful questions about location, funding, and business models. But instead of making it feel clinical, his interest made the dream feel more real, more possible. What's stopping you? He asked finally. Money. Experience. The fact that restaurants fail at an alarming rate. Celeste shrugged. Take your pick. Those are obstacles, not stop signs. Before she could ask what he meant, Evelyn yawned widely, the excitement and fresh air finally catching up with her. As Celeste carried the sleepy child to her bedroom, Evelyn wrapped her arms around her neck and whispered, I love you, Celeste. Are you going to be my new mama? The question stopped Celeste's heart. Oh, sweetheart. I know you and Daddy love each other. I can tell by the way you look at each other when you think I'm not watching. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. Celeste tucked Evelyn into the hotel's luxurious bed, her mind reeling from the casual certainty in the child's voice. When she returned to the living room, Harrison was standing at the window, his reflection ghost-like against the glittering Manhattan skyline. She asked if I was going to be her new mama, Celeste said quietly. Harrison turned, his expression unreadable. What did you tell her? I didn't know what to tell her. Harrison, this thing between us. It's happening fast. Maybe too fast. Or maybe, he said, crossing to stand in front of her, some things are worth moving fast for. The air between them crackled with possibility and danger in equal measure. The crash came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after their magical New York trip. Celeste was in the kitchen making Evelyn's breakfast when she heard unfamiliar voices in the foyer. Sharp, cultured tones that cut through the house's usual warmth like broken glass. Harrison, this has gone on quite long enough. The voice belonged to an older woman, imperious and cold. I've been patient, but bringing that woman to New York was the final straw. The society pages are already talking. Celeste's hand stilled over the pancake batter as Harrison's voice responded, tight with controlled anger. Mother, I told you to call before coming over. I shouldn't need an appointment to visit my own son. Especially when he's clearly lost his mind. Through the kitchen doorway, Celeste caught a glimpse of the speaker, an elegant woman in her 60s wearing a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than Celeste's annual rent. Her silver hair was pulled back in a perfect chignon, and she carried herself with the authority of someone who'd never been told no. Eleanor Vale, Evelyn whispered, appearing at Celeste's elbow. Daddy's mama. She doesn't like anyone. Before Celeste could respond, another voice joined the conversation. Male, younger, with the same privileged cadence. Harrison, we need to discuss the board's concerns about your recent choices. The man speaking was tall and thin with prematurely gray hair and the kind of calculated smile that never reached his eyes. I'm afraid the Whitmore acquisition is in jeopardy because of questions about your judgment. My judgment. Harrison's voice carried a dangerous edge. Since when is my personal life the board's concern, Bradford? Bradford. Celeste recognized the name. Harrison's younger brother, the one who'd been angling for control of the family company since their father's death. Since you started parading around with the help, Eleanor's voice dripped with disdain. Really? Harrison. A cook.
From the South Side?
What were you thinking? The words hit Celeste like physical blows. The help. As if everything she was, everything she'd shared with Harrison and Evelyn, could be reduced to a job description. She's not the help, Harrison said, his voice deadly quiet. She's... What? Your girlfriend? Your fiancée? Bradford laughed, the sound cruel and mocking. Come on, Harrison. You're a veil. We don't marry the servants, no matter how pretty they are. Celeste gripped the counter, feeling the familiar burn of shame and anger that came with being reduced to her economic status. She'd felt this before. In school when wealthy classmates' parents found out where she lived, at her mother's workplace when the other housekeepers whispered about her putting on airs by dreaming of college. Celeste makes Daddy happy, Evelyn said loudly, marching toward the foyer with 8-year-old righteous indignation. And she makes me eat. She's better than all of you. Evelyn, go back to the kitchen, Harrison said firmly. But Daddy... Now! Evelyn returned to the kitchen with tears in her eyes, and Celeste automatically pulled the child into her arms, both of them straining to hear the conversation that would determine their fate. See what's happening? Eleanor's voice had turned viciously sweet. The child is becoming attached to someone who's completely inappropriate. What happens when this little infatuation ends and you send her away? Evelyn has already been traumatized by one woman abandoning her. I'm not going to abandon her, Celeste whispered, but even as she said it, she felt the walls closing in. The board is concerned about stability, Bradford continued. About leadership that makes emotional rather than rational decisions. The Whitmore deal represents $2 billion in revenue, Harrison. They're threatening to walk if they can't trust your judgment. Then let them walk. You can't be serious. This company is our legacy, our responsibility to 5 generations of Valles. You're going to risk all of that for a fling with someone you've known for 2 weeks. The silence stretched long enough for Celeste to feel her world crumbling. 2 weeks. When Bradford said it like that, it sounded pathetic. What kind of responsible father appended his life based on a 2-week acquaintance? She's not a fling, Harrison said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't she? You met her when you were desperate about Evelyn. She helped, you were grateful, and now you're confusing gratitude with something deeper. Eleanor's voice turned almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. Harrison, darling, I understand the appeal. She's lovely, she's been wonderful with Evelyn, and you've been lonely since Rachel left. But this isn't real life. This is crisis management. Crisis management. The words echoed in Celeste's mind, giving voice to every insecurity she'd been trying to suppress. Was that all she was? A temporary solution to Harrison's emergency? Think about Evelyn's future, Bradford pressed. The connections she'll need, the social circles she'll move in. Do you really want her growing up with a stepmother who... Stop! Harrison's voice cracked like a whip. Don't you dare finish that sentence. But the damage was done. Celeste could fill in the blanks. A stepmother who didn't belong, who would embarrass the family, who would hold Evelyn back from her proper place in society. I'm just saying, Bradford continued smoothly, there are ways to handle this that benefit everyone. Set the woman up with her own restaurant, give her a generous settlement, help her build the life she wants. Everyone wins. Set her up. Like she was a mistress being bought off. Like everything between her and Harrison could be reduced to a transaction. Get out. Harrison's voice was barely controlled rage. Both of you. Get out of my house. Harrison. Eleanor began. Now. Celeste heard the front door slam, followed by the sound of Harrison's footsteps heading toward his study. The house fell silent except for Evelyn's quiet sniffling against her shoulder. For an hour, Celeste went through the motions of normalcy. She finished making breakfast, helped Evelyn with a puzzle, started preparing lunch. But Bradford's words kept echoing. Crisis management. 2 weeks. The help. By noon, she couldn't stand it anymore. She found Harrison in his study, staring out the window with the same expression he'd worn that first day. Defeated, isolated, unreachable. "We need to talk," she said quietly. He turned, and she saw the devastation in his eyes. "I'm sorry." What they said was unforgivable. Was it? Or were they just saying what everyone's thinking? Celeste crossed her arms, armor against the pain. "Your cook, your employee, your crisis management solution. You know that's not what you are. Do I? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I'm a really expensive Band-Aid. Good for the emergency, but not built to last." Harrison stood abruptly, running his hands through his hair. "That's not fair. Isn't it? 2 weeks ago, you tried to hire me. Yesterday, your family offered to buy me off. At what point do I stop being a person and start being a problem to be solved with money? You're being ridiculous." The word hit like a slap. Ridiculous. The same word her mother's employers had used when she'd asked for time off to attend Celeste's high school graduation. The same word her college boyfriend had used when she'd gotten upset about his friend's classist jokes. "You know what's ridiculous?" Celeste's voice was dangerously quiet. "Thinking that love could bridge the gap between your world and mine. Thinking that fairy tales happen to girls like me. Celeste, please. I heard what your brother said about Evelyn's future. About the connections she'll need, the social circles she'll move in. He's right, isn't he? I can't give her that. I can't even fit into that world myself. I don't care about that world." "Yes, you do. You live in it, you built your fortune in it, your daughter will inherit it. And I'll always be the outsider who doesn't know which fork to use." Harrison stared at her, and she saw the moment when doubt crept into his eyes. The moment when her worst fears were confirmed. "So that's it." His voice was hollow. "You're just going to run? I'm going to be realistic. About who I am, where I come from, and where I belong." Celeste's voice broke slightly. "Evelyn is eating now. She's stable. She doesn't need me anymore. I need you." The words hung between them, raw and desperate. But they came too late, after too much damage. "No," Celeste said sadly. "You need someone who fits. Someone who won't cost you business deals or family approval. Someone who belongs in your world. You belong with us." "Do I?" "Because your family just offered to buy me a restaurant to make me go away, and you haven't said you wouldn't take the deal." The silence stretched until it became its own answer. Celeste nodded, her heart breaking cleanly in two. "I'll pack my things. Tell Evelyn. Tell her I had to go back to Grandma Nora. That I'll always love her." She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "For what it's worth, these 2 weeks were the most real thing I've ever experienced. I hope someday you find someone who can give you that feeling without all the complications." As she walked away, Harrison called her name once, but she didn't turn around. Couldn't turn around, because she was afraid if she looked at his face, she'd lose her resolve and stay to be slowly diminished by a world that would never truly accept her. Behind her, she heard something crash. Probably the crystal decanter that had been sitting on his desk. The sound of something else beautiful breaking. For 3 days, Harrison's house felt like a mausoleum. Evelyn refused to leave her room except for meals, picking at her food with the same listless disinterest that had terrified him weeks ago. She didn't ask where Celeste had gone. Children always knew more than adults gave them credit for, but her eyes held an accusation that cut deeper than any words. Harrison threw himself into work with the desperate intensity of a drowning man, but even billion-dollar deals couldn't silence the echo of Celeste's voice. "You need someone who fits." The Whitmore acquisition was back on track. His mother was pleased with his return to sensibility, and Bradford had stopped making pointed comments about emotional decision-making. He should have felt victorious. Instead, he felt hollow. On Thursday evening, as snow began falling outside his study windows, Harrison found himself staring at a business card that his assistant had placed on his desk that morning. Philippe Dubois, Executive chef, the Plaza Hotel. The French chef had called twice, asking about the magnificent woman who had cooked magic in my kitchen. Monsieur Vale, Philippe had said in heavily accented English during their brief conversation, I must speak with Mademoiselle Turner. She has a gift that cannot be taught, only born with. My investors, they would be very interested in backing her restaurant dream. Restaurant dream. The words haunted Harrison because he realized with sickening clarity that he'd never asked Celeste for details about her vision. He'd listened that night in New York, had asked business questions, but he'd never truly understood what Nora's table meant to her. He'd been thinking like an investor, not like a man in love. Meanwhile, 23 miles south, Celeste sat in her grandmother's kitchen feeling like a ghost of herself. She'd told Nora everything, about Evelyn's illness, about Harrison's family, about the choice she'd made to leave before she was pushed out. Baby girl, Nora said, her weathered hands gentle as she braided Celeste's hair. Sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. But sometimes they're not. I don't know the difference anymore, Grandma. Then let me ask you this. When you were in that big house, taking care of that little girl, loving that man, did you feel like you were pretending to be someone else? Celeste considered the question. No. I felt like I was becoming who I was always meant to be. And when his family was talking about buying you off, making you disappear, what did that feel like? Like being erased. Like everything I am could be reduced to a problem with a price tag. Nora nodded thoughtfully. Fear and wisdom can look awfully similar sometimes. You got to figure out which one made you run. That evening, Celeste's phone rang. Harrison's name on the screen made her heart race, but she let it go to voicemail. She wasn't ready to hear his voice, wasn't ready to risk her resolve. But when she played the message later, it wasn't Harrison's voice at all. Celeste. It's me, Evelyn. The little girl's voice was small and shaky. I took Daddy's phone when he was in the shower. I know you had to go back to Grandma Nora, but I miss you so much it makes my tummy hurt. Daddy won't eat dinner, and he keeps staring at your cookbook like it might tell him secrets. I think he's broken without you. Like I was broken before you came. Please come back. I promise I'll eat all my vegetables forever if you just come back. The message ended with a sound of muffled tears, and Celeste found herself crying too. For the little girl who'd lost another mother figure, for the man who was probably beating himself up for failing again, for the love story that had been too beautiful to survive the real world. Friday morning brought an unexpected visitor to Nora's front porch. Harrison stood there in the December cold, looking nothing like the polished CEO she'd first met. His hair was uncombed, his expensive coat wrinkled, and his eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion and grief. She won't eat, he said without preamble when Celeste opened the door. Evelyn. She's back to refusing food, and I can't. I don't know how to fix this. Celeste's heart clenched, but she kept her voice steady. She's grieving. She'll eat when she's ready. Will she? Because I'm not sure I know the difference between grief and giving up anymore. Harrison's voice cracked. I've been sitting in my study for 3 days, trying to figure out how I failed so completely. At being a father, a man, a human being worthy of love. Harrison. Let me finish. Please. He took a shaky breath. My brother was right about one thing. I was in crisis management mode when we met. Desperate, terrified, grasping at anything that might save my daughter. But he was wrong about everything else. Snowflakes caught in his dark hair as he spoke, and Celeste had to grip the doorframe to keep from reaching out to brush them away. What happened between us wasn't gratitude or convenience or some rich man's fantasy. It was the first real thing I've felt in years. Maybe ever. His gray eyes met hers with devastating honesty. You didn't just save Evelyn. You saved me from becoming the kind of man who measures everything by profit margins and social standing. Your family will never accept me, Celeste said quietly. The board will always see me as a liability. Evelyn will grow up caught between two worlds that don't understand each other. Then we'll build a new world. One where love matters more than pedigree, where the only connections that count are the ones between hearts. Harrison stepped closer, close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his eyes. Celeste, I know I have no right to ask this after letting you walk away, after not fighting for us when it mattered. But I'm fighting now. Before she could respond, he pulled out his phone and showed her the screen, a news article with the headline, Vail Industries CEO divests holdings, commits to philanthropic ventures. What is this? Celeste whispered. I sold my controlling interest in the company to Bradford this morning. Kept enough to provide for Evelyn's future, but the rest is going into a foundation. Food insecurity, childhood hunger, supporting community restaurants like the one you want to build. Celeste stared at him in shock. You gave up your company? I gave up a legacy built on choosing money over people. I want to build something different with you. Something that matters. Harrison, you can't just throw away everything you've worked for. I'm not throwing it away. I'm investing it in something better. In us. In the family we could become. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I know this is crazy. I know we've only known each other for 3 weeks. But I also know that some things are worth moving fast for. Celeste's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal not some massive diamond that screamed wealth, but a simple, elegant ring with a stone the color of autumn leaves. Her favorite color, she realized with a start. It's not about the money or the social status or any of that garbage my family thinks matters, Harrison said, dropping to one knee on her grandmother's worn porch. It's about Sunday morning pancakes and bedtime stories and growing old with someone who sees me for who I really am. It's about giving Evelyn a mother who loves her not because she has to, but because she chooses to, every single day. Through the window, Celeste could see her grandmother watching with tears in her eyes and what looked suspiciously like a smile. Celeste Turner, Harrison continued, his voice steady despite the emotion swimming in his eyes. Will you marry me? Will you help me build a life where love comes first and everything else figures itself out? The rational part of Celeste's mind catalogued all the reasons to say no, the cultural differences, the family opposition, the speed of everything. But her heart was remembering Evelyn's laughter in the kitchen, Harrison's vulnerability during their midnight conversations, the feeling of belonging she'd found in their temporary family. I need to know something first, she said, her voice barely audible. When the next crisis comes, and there will be another crisis, will you choose me? Choose us? Or will you revert to old patterns and try to manage your way out of love? Harrison stood slowly, the ring box still open between them. I can't promise I won't make mistakes. But I can promise I'll never again let fear or pride convince me that love is a problem to be solved instead of a gift to be treasured. Behind them, Nora's voice called out, Chili, if you don't say yes to that man, I'm gonna come out there and accept for you. Celeste laughed through her tears, looking at the man who'd given up his empire for a chance at happiness, who'd driven across the city to fight for their love, who was standing on her grandmother's porch with snow in his hair and his heart in his hands. Yes, she whispered. Yes, yes, yes. As Harrison slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, Celeste realized that sometimes fairy tales didn't end with carriages and castles. Sometimes they began with courage and the choice to love despite the obstacles. 6 months later, on a perfect June morning in Chicago, Celeste stood before the bathroom mirror in what used to be Harrison's guest suite and was now their shared bedroom, adjusting her wedding dress for the 3rd time. The gown wasn't the elaborate creation that society magazines would have expected. Instead, it was a simple A-line dress in ivory silk that her grandmother had helped her choose, with delicate lace sleeves that had belonged to her mother. You look beautiful, baby girl, Nora said from the doorway, her own dress a rich purple that complemented her dignified silver hair. At 79, she moved a little slower than she used to, but her eyes were bright with joy and the satisfaction of seeing her granddaughter truly happy. I'm nervous, Celeste admitted, smoothing the skirt with trembling hands. What if this is all too much? What if I can't be the wife he needs, the mother Evelyn deserves? Honey, you've been those things for months already. Today's just making it official. It was true. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of changes, challenges, and unexpected joys. Harrison had kept his word about divesting from Vale Industries, though the transition had been more complex than either of them had anticipated. Bradford now ran the company with their mother's blessing, while Harrison focused on the newly established Turnervale Foundation, a name that had been Evelyn's suggestion and made Celeste cry happy tears for an hour. The foundation's first project was already underway, a community kitchen and training center on Chicago's South Side, just blocks from where Celeste had grown up. Nora's Table would officially open in the fall, but it was already serving free meals to families in need while training local residents in culinary arts. Celeste! Evelyn's voice carried down the hallway, bright with excitement. Mrs. Patterson is here with the flowers, and they're even more beautiful than we planned. The wedding itself was a reflection of who they'd become as a family. Intimate, meaningful, and decidedly unconventional. Instead of some exclusive country club, they were getting married in the sanctuary of New Hope Baptist Church, where Nora had been a member for 40 years. The same church where Celeste had sung in the children's choir, where she'd learned that love was meant to be shared, not hoarded. Harrison had insisted on asking Pastor Williams for permission personally, showing up on a Tuesday evening in jeans and a simple shirt to request the honor of marrying the most extraordinary woman I've ever known, in the place that had shaped her faith and values. "You sure about this, son?" Pastor Williams had asked with the gentle directness of a man who'd counseled couples for 3 decades. "Not just about marrying Celeste. I can see that love shining all over both of you. But about joining this community, being part of something that might not always be comfortable for a man from your background." "Pastor, I've spent my whole life being comfortable, and it nearly cost me everything that mattered. If being part of Celeste's community means being uncomfortable sometimes, then that's exactly where I need to be." Now, as Celeste made her way downstairs, she could hear the church filling with an unlikely mix of guests. Harrison's carefully selected friends and business associates mingling with neighbors from her old block, Evelyn's classmates from her new school, and the growing community of people connected to the foundation's work. Eleanor Vale had surprised everyone by asking to attend, though her acceptance had come with typical conditions. "I may not understand your choices, Harrison," she'd said during a stilted phone conversation, "but Evelyn loves this woman, and you're clearly happier than I've seen you since childhood. I suppose I can learn to appreciate that." It wasn't exactly a warm embrace, but it was progress. The real surprise had been Rachel's call 2 weeks before the wedding. Harrison's ex-wife had reached out not to cause drama, but to give her blessing and to ask if she could FaceTime with Evelyn before the ceremony. "I made mistakes," Rachel had admitted during a tearful video call. "I let my own unhappiness make me think that running away was the answer. But seeing how well Evelyn is doing, how happy she sounds when she talks about Celeste, I'm grateful, truly grateful that she has someone who loves her the way I should have." At the church, Harrison stood at the altar in a navy suit that had been tailored to perfection but somehow looked comfortable rather than corporate. His hair caught the morning light streaming through the stained glass windows, and when he saw Celeste appear at the back of the sanctuary, his face transformed with a kind of joy that made every guest smile involuntarily. Evelyn, radiant in a flowing yellow dress that matched the sunflowers in her bouquet, walked down the aisle first, scattering rose petals with a serious concentration of someone performing a very important job. She'd insisted on being both flower girl and junior maid of honor, declaring that she had double duties in making sure this wedding was perfect. When Celeste appeared, walking arm in arm with her grandmother, the sanctuary fell silent except for the gentle murmur of appreciation. She looked like sunshine and grace, her natural beauty enhanced by happiness rather than hidden behind expensive cosmetics and designer everything. Harrison watched her approach with the wonder of a man who still couldn't quite believe his good fortune. In 6 months, she'd transformed not just his house but his entire existence. The mansion that had felt like a museum now rang with laughter and the sounds of cooking and life being lived fully. Evelyn had gained 15 pounds and grown 2 inches, her cheeks round with health and her eyes bright with security. "Dearly beloved," Pastor Williams began, his deep voice carrying the authority of faith and experience, "we are gathered here today not just to witness a wedding, but to celebrate the power of love to transform lives and build families that honor God and serve others. The ceremony itself was simple but profound. Harrison and Celeste had written their own vows, and when the moment came, neither needed to look at their carefully prepared notes. "Celeste," Harrison said, his voice steady but thick with emotion, "6 months ago, you walked into my kitchen and saved my daughter's life. But you did something even more miraculous. You saved mine. You taught me that love isn't something to be earned or managed or controlled. It's something to be given freely, received gratefully, and shared generously." He paused, looking out at the faces of their gathered community before returning his gaze to her. "I promise to choose you every day, not because it's easy or convenient, but because loving you has made me the man I always wanted to be. I promise to honor the wisdom you carry, the strength you've shown, and the dreams we're building together. And I promise to never again let pride or fear convince me that love is anything less than the most important thing in the world." Celeste's response was delivered through tears that sparkled like diamonds in the morning light. "Harrison, you once asked me what works when everything else fails. The answer is faith. Faith in each other, faith in the love that brought us together, and faith in the family we're creating. You and Evelyn didn't just give me a home. You gave me a purpose bigger than anything I'd ever imagined." She reached out to include Evelyn in their circle, and the little girl beamed with pride. "I promise to love you both fiercely and faithfully, through every challenge and celebration. I promise to help Evelyn grow into the amazing woman she's already becoming, and to support your dreams even when they scare me. Most of all, I promise to remember that we're not just building a marriage. We're building a legacy of love that will feed hungry hearts for generations to come." When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, the sanctuary erupted in cheers that could probably be heard 3 blocks away. Harrison kissed his bride with the passion of a man who'd found his home, while Evelyn jumped up and down with pure joy. The reception was held in the church's fellowship hall, transformed into a celebration that perfectly captured their blended worlds. Tables groaned under the weight of both Celeste's Southern cooking and catering from some of Chicago's finest restaurants. The wedding cake was a masterpiece created by Philippe, who'd flown in from New York for the occasion, but the real star was the dessert table featuring Nora's famous peach cobbler and chocolate cake recipes. As the evening wound down and guests began to say their goodbyes, Harrison found himself standing in the doorway watching his wife, dance with Evelyn to a Motown classic that had everyone swaying. The sight of them together, their faces bright with laughter, filled him with a contentment he'd never thought possible. "You did good, son," Pastor Williams said, joining him in the doorway. "Real good." "I got lucky," Harrison replied. "Luckier than I deserved. Luck had nothing to do with it. Love like this is a gift from God, but it takes courage to accept it and wisdom to nurture it. You both showed plenty of both." Later that night, after Evelyn had fallen asleep in her flower girl dress and been carried to bed, Harrison and Celeste sat on their back patio overlooking Lake Michigan. The water reflected the city lights like scattered stars, and the warm June air carried the promise of summer adventures ahead. "So, Mrs. Vale," Harrison said, pulling his wife closer on the swing they'd installed just last month, "any regrets about marrying a reformed workaholic billionaire?" "Only one," Celeste said with mock seriousness. "I'm going to miss being Celeste Turner." "You don't have to change your name if you don't want to." "I want to. I want us to all have the same name, be officially a family." She smiled up at him. "Besides, Celeste Vale has a nice ring to it." "What about Celeste Vale Turner? Best of both worlds." "Perfect. Just like us." As they sat there planning their future, the restaurant opening, Evelyn's upcoming school year, the possibility of expanding the foundation's reach, both knew they'd found something rare and precious. Not a fairy tale ending, but a real beginning. A love story built on choosing each other daily, on faith and food, and the belief that the best families are the ones you create with intention and grace. In the distance, the city hummed with life and possibility, while inside their home, Evelyn slept peacefully, dreaming of a future filled with love, laughter, and all the pancakes shaped like flowers that her heart could desire. Some stories end with happily ever after, but the best ones end with happily ever beginning. And theirs was just getting started.